So we're in this moment where I think all of us want our kids to go back to school. We want to kind of get back to somewhat near normal. We want life to return to what it was at one point. But there are those of us who are going, well, you know what? Maybe we take a second, we do it right so that this doesn't get worse. Because part of the problem that we're facing is there are a number of variants that are popping up that we don't know how to deal with because it has gotten so big and so out of control that the virus is actually mutated in ways that we're not really quite sure of. So in this moment, we've gone through all this. We've followed this entire journey, and we've gotten to this point. Why now go and make it even worse? And I look at Chicago, where the teachers are going, hold on, wait a second. We don't have the resources that we need to put kids in a classroom all the time. We certainly don't have the resources to have people come in and clean and do the deep cleaning that needs to be done. We don't have the space to do the social distancing. We should not be opening up our schools just yet. And you've got a Democratic mayor who's saying, no, we've got a study. We have a study. And that study says it's going to be fine. And the teachers are going, no. I'm here to share some thoughts on, where we are in this divide, because on Sunday, the Chicago mayor said, you're coming back. And on Sunday, the teacher said, no, I don't think so. I'm here to share some thoughts on that. I've asked our good friend Kenzo Shibata to come talk with us. Kenzo's a high school teacher there in Chicago, also the CTU's functional vice president for high school. Kenzo, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks so much for having me on. I'm glad to share this information with your audience.
So walk me through this. We all saw the story on Sunday. You had the mayor come out, little Rahm Emanuel, who's saying, go back to school, Kenzo. And you're going, hold on a second. We don't think it's safe. Walk me through that process of what happened on Sunday.
Well, on Sunday, we have a new mayor, Lori Lightfoot, and we have been in negotiations as a union about what safe reopening would look like for months now. And on Monday, the Board of Education and the mayor was expecting teachers to come in, teachers and other school workers, pre-K through 8th grade schools to teach in person. And I can get to in a minute to why that's kind of a non-starter. But on Sunday, they were supposed to, the Board of Education and the mayor, our schools are run by the mayor essentially. So she has to be at the table to get things done. Instead of being at the table with our union leadership, they were doing those Sunday talk shows, she and the CPS CEO of schools, Janice Jackson. So it was really disheartening because that could have been a day where a deal could have been made and we would have gone into Monday knowing what things were going to look like. And since then, the mayor, and this is, I think, the third time she's pushed the deadline. She said yesterday that she is going to do a 48-hour cool down. But, I think the important thing in the context here is that a couple weeks ago, the union, the Chicago Teachers Union, we took a vote, and that vote said that we were going to continue to work remotely, regardless of whether or not we're called back into the schools. And if the school district continues to lock us out, we will, as an entire union, even those not affected, go out on strike. So it's minute by minute, we're waiting for some good news, but we know at least there's a stay of 48 hours before there will be movement. But in the meantime, we're still teaching remotely.
I read this story that she said, if you don't come back, we're going to cut off your access to the remote stuff so that, if you won't come back to the classroom and be in harm's way, we're not going to let you do the other stuff. And I'm going, but hold on, where do the kids play in this? Because look, I don't want my kids to go back in an unsafe condition. I don't want them bringing something home to their grandparents or their mothers or their fathers. We're in this moment. This is the height of it. We're finally breaking over the peak where we're not getting 100,000+ new cases a day and 4,000 people dying. We're finally seeing maybe a break of light. And now you're saying, because you've got this study that came out during the Trump years that things are fine, that you're going to rush back into it? Makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it totally doesn't. And it doesn't make sense to me. I'm a parent as well. That's one of the things that kills me when the school district says, well, parents think this and teachers think that. Well, most teachers I know are parents or have some sort of family that they're accountable to. So, we're both. and my son is working from home. We don't love it. We would much prefer for him to be working with his classmates and socializing and doing all that stuff, but it's just not safe. And as it is now, his teacher, my wife did a lot of work organizing parents. She's a room parent, and she was there to talk to everyone about how unsafe the conditions are. Because in the school district, the principals, what are their job? They're tasked by the Chicago Public Schools with selling in-person teaching. So of course you're going to trust the principal. You send your kid to the same school that the principal works at, so you're going to trust them. But that's why parent involvement was so important. And my wife called, and all but like one student now is doing distant learning. And his poor teacher, she's such a hard worker. She's going to have to teach one student in front of her behind plexiglass with a mask on, and then also at a webcam of 15 other kids. I don't know how she's going to do it, but that's, the board doesn't have a real plan.
Yeah, and this again, it comes back to the failure of leadership, where they now have this, you're going to do what we say you're going to do, and not willing to take all these other things into consideration. Where over the summer, I gotta be honest with you, Kenzo, this should have been something you guys were worked out over the summertime. Like a lot of this stuff, when there was the lull between, and we knew there was going to be a lull between the height of March, April, and May. When we got to June, July, August, we should have been going, hey, the real problem's coming. Let's get all this stuff worked out now. And nobody did that. And that's what's just incredibly frustrating.
I'm so glad you said that, because the school district, we went to we went into virtual teaching last spring. Our mayor was going to have us do in person throughout the pandemic. It wasn't until the governor stepped in and put a stop to that, and shut down the entire state for a period of time. And then throughout the pandemic last school year, there was periodic reminders from the district, like, this was a temporary thing. We're going to do in person. So of course, us at the union and our union officers leading the charge here, we're trying to get meetings with the board saying, okay, for the 2020-21 school year, what's this going to look like? And they just said, well, because in this situation, the mayor has total authority over the schools. We hold the power as communities and teachers and students and parents, but they have all the authority. So they've just locked us out of those discussions. And then when things got closer and closer to the school year, they unveiled this plan. The plan was untenable. It was even worse than the plan they unveiled this year. And so the union's House of Delegates, those are the representatives in all of our school buildings, we came together over Zoom and took a vote. We planned the meeting to take a vote on a strike. Just the fact that we announced this meeting forced the hand of the Chicago Public Schools. And then this school year started remotely. And then, it's just like a repeat of last year, where periodically they're reminding us we can move you back into the classrooms. And now they're trying to do that. And they're playing divide and conquer by sending elementary and not high school at the moment.
Now, there's a study out there, and maybe you can talk a little bit to this, and I'd love to know who's behind this, who's funding the study, because anytime I see a study, the first thing I want to know is who paid for it. Because generally you can figure out, you don't even have to read it. Generally, you find out who paid for it, you know what the conclusion is going to be. So I'd like to start with, this study that they're going after, saying, well, we can send those kids back into the classroom, and they usually don't get sick, and they usually don't take it with them, and this isn't a risk. So can you tell me about the study that they're using as the basis for saying, no, Kenzo, you guys can go back. You guys can go back.
Well, I mean, we're looking at it, and it's a total non-starter, because children are special. And you could say X amount of bodies in a room could cause infection, but if you look at things like, some students have in their individualized education plans that they are not required to wear a mask. For some reason, they have a medical condition where they can't, and it's just kind of glossed over that teachers and school workers are going to have to work with these kids. And the kids do have an absolute right to equal education, but it's not safe to do that in person. And other things that they don't really keep in mind is that there are students that go through many, many masks in a day because they have problems like keeping saliva in their mouths. And There are workers that have to work on that. And schools are special places where little kids give hugs when it's inappropriate. And they don't know any better. They think you can make a mistake and then, oops, I'm sorry. But, once they've given a hug to another kid or to a teacher, you can't turn back from there. So, as parents, the parent group Raise Your Hand, they're organizing parents around this, and they saw that immediately, and we're like, no, this is a non-starter.
Yeah, but back to these people who are saying that none of that stuff's a problem, because the private schools. I guess the private schools in your area have been doing in-person schooling since the fall. In fact, a Chicago listener sent me, this whole long dissertation on how, the private schools and some of these charters, they've been doing it well. And then, sent me this little comparison about, the just complete difference in resources that the charter schools and the private schools have compared to what the public schools have. And for me, there are two arguments. One, the first one being we should never send our kids into schools that are as badly funded as the public schools are. And two, how did it get that way? That we've allowed our public schools to be just starved to the point to where, as the one guy, as he said, he goes, the kids come in, they have to bring their own masks, they have to rewear them. As where you go to some of these private schools and these charter schools, they've got disposable masks that they go through multiple ones per day, to your point. And, for me, if we don't have the bare minimums, how are you going to move forward if you don't have class sizes that are comparable? And he said, the private schools have been able to spread out. They got like 9 kids in a class, where the public schools have like 25 or 30. There's a lot of differences. So you can't just say, hey, they're doing it, we should too. That's not very bright.
And, a big thing in the Chicago public schools is, we fought in the last contract to get one nurse in every school, and we won it, but we won it on this graduated program for hiring the nurses. The board said, it would be impossible to hire that many nurses the first year of the contract. And so we agreed to this timetable. And what's kind of heartbreaking about it is the timetable that we agreed to should be the floor. Like the things that we outlined in the contract negotiations were things that could have mitigated the damage of this, the pandemic in the schools. And the district, instead of saying, okay, a nurse in every school, well, we're going to try to do this as quickly as possible, they said, well, they basically are doing the absolute bare minimum to fold them in. And, I'm not saying that teachers were psychic and predicted the pandemic, but everything we asked for in the last contract, a nurse in every school, a social worker in every school, psychologist in every school, additional, clean bathrooms. Like there were so many things that we demanded that would have made us at least better prepared for this.
But here's the thing, Kenzo, and if I could stop you there, the thing that you're asking for is not outrageous. That's commonplace in most schools across this country. Because I remember talking about the Philadelphia school district who, they didn't have nurses in every school. And in fact, there were a couple of children who died. Now, whether those nurses could have intervened and helped those children, I can't say, but they didn't have a shot because there was nobody there. You had schools that don't have librarians, they don't have guidance counselors, they don't have the bare minimums of what people, at least of my age group, think of as normal. So you've got all of these challenges that you don't have already, and now you're going to put global pandemic on top of that.
I was just talking to Mary DeFino. She's a social worker and an activist in Chicago. And what I didn't even realize is with the social worker component, what we demanded, if we were to staff one social worker at every school, the caseload would still be one social worker for every 500 students, which she said is 10 times what her professional guild recommends.
Wow.
So even, we're far behind the bare minimum that experts think we have in these schools. And once we do go back into in-person, our students and our teachers are going to be deeply, deeply traumatized. And so the board needs to act up and, hire these social workers, and how, if they can go beyond our contract and hire more for the sake of the kids, maybe we wouldn't distrust them as much as we do.
Yeah, this just seems bizarre to me, that in this moment they're going to come out and try and impose this and do this kind of strong arm tactic. But let me ask you the other side of this, because I do have some people who have said, well, you know what, kids are being traumatized by this because they're not doing well in the online world, and that we should give them the option. My mindset is simple. If we don't have the resources to do one or the other, there's no way in hell we can do both. But I'm curious your thought.
I mean, that's the big bottom line, is that we can't afford to do both. And we're going to see if it comes to it and teachers are trying to teach simultaneously and in person. We'll see, how that works, and if it works. I agree that what is best for young people is in-person schooling. I think education is really an important part of schooling, but it's the socialization that's also really important. But in my school and the district where I teach, students are being heavily affected by COVID. Like, the first person I lost to COVID was a former student of mine who's, he was 31, and he's someone that I was a bit of a mentor to. So it was very real to me, and it's very real to a lot of teachers, and it's definitely very real to poor and working class Black and brown communities. And I think that is why the number of parents that are actually signing up for in-person is very paltry. In fact, only 20% of eligible parents signed up at all. And that number keeps dropping because they'll send their kids to school, they'll see the conditions, and then they pull their kids out and do virtual again. And so the parents have kind of spoken with their feet in this case.
Yeah, you would think that they would listen. So last question I've got for you, is there a way we can help? What can people do to help, even in their school districts?
Well, this is what we know is at stake here in Chicago, is when we had, West Virginia and Arizona, these red state, right to work states going out on strike, their teachers going on strike. They all cited Chicago as inspiration for that. And that's why we feel like, we have to win this, because once we win this, then we're going to take this blueprint to all those other places and show them how to fight it. Because even though it's illegal to strike in those states, one thing that I want to note is that our last two mayors accused all of our strikes of being unfair or illegal, and tried to get injunctions on all of them. So we're living in this era of bad faith and from our leaders, and they just don't get labor, and we have to teach them. And I think we teach them through job actions. Hopefully this won't come to a strike, but we definitely are prepared if it comes down to it.
Good stuff. Kenzo, I wish you guys the best. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thanks so much. Kenzo Shibata, a high school teacher and a VP of functional high schools there at the Chicago Teachers Union. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.